are still here, and that matters more than the weight you have been carrying tonight. This message comes to you like a hand on the door when your strength has already started to thin, and something in it is asking you not to walk away yet. I am speaking to the part of you that has been tired, but still listening, because heaven does not ignore the listener who is almost too weary to keep going. There are moments when the soul hears a warning before the mind can explain it, and this is one of those moments. God is not far from you in this hour, and the reason you feel resistance is not because you are forgotten, but because you are being held in a struggle that matters. Stay with me, because what feels like the end may be the very place where your endurance is being named. You have reached a threshold where quitting would look easier than faith, but easier is not always truer. The whisper over your life is not giving up, not now, not here, not after all you have already survived. Something sacred is pressing against your exhaustion, and it is asking for one more breath, one more listening heart, one more moment of trust. When a person is close to surrendering, even silence feels louder, and the room itself seems to watch the decline. You may not have the language for what is happening, but your body has been speaking it for days. Your shoulders have been carrying a kind of gravity that words do not solve, and your chest has been learning how to hold back tears without ever naming them. You open the phone, close the phone, and feel the same ache return, as if your hands are doing what your heart no longer believes it can do. Yet this heaviness is not proof that you are failing. It is often the place where spiritual pressure becomes visible in ordinary flesh. What looks like collapse may be the point where something in you is finally refusing to live numb. I am not telling you to deny the pain, only to recognize that pain does not always mean loss. Sometimes pain is the sound of a life refusing to be abandoned to despair. And if you stay, the next part of this message will show you why. This is not random, and it is not a wasted season. The repeated pressure you have felt is carrying a meaning that is being revealed slowly, the way morning enters a room without asking permission. You have been trying to read your life as if every delay were rejection. But the pattern is pointing toward protection, preparation, correction, and return. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuzazara readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. The day has had its own way of speaking to you, through the same names, the same rooms, the same tired pauses between one task and the next. What keeps circling back is not there to torment you, it is there to expose what still needs to be surrendered. There is a kind of mercy in that, even when it feels sharp. You do not need to pretend that the ache is small in order to believe that God is near. You only need to let the ache tell the truth. By the end of this, you will see that the resistance around you has been shaping the resistance within you, and both are being confronted at the same time. You will recognize why your peace has been interrupted, why certain conversations have begun to drain instead of comfort, and why some answers arrived too late to become your confidence. You will also recognize that what looks unfinished may be the place where your obedience is becoming cleaner. This is a message for the one who keeps asking whether the waiting means the door is closed. The answer is more careful than that, and more hopeful than that. Some doors do not open because the soul is still learning how to stand without begging. Some delays are not denials, but they do demand discernment. And some forms of silence are not absence, they are formation. You have been in that kind of silence, and it has not been wasted. Think about a kitchen late in the evening, when the light is soft and the sink still holds the evidence of the day. A plate sits untouched, a cup rests near the edge of the counter, and the whole room seems to know that your mind is somewhere far beyond it. You move through that room with a tired body, and even the smallest chore feels like it belongs to someone who has already run out of fuel. That is how this season has felt in your life. One ordinary thing after another, asking for strength that you thought you no longer had. The pain has not always arrived as drama. Sometimes it has arrived as routine. Sometimes it has been a message left unanswered, a bed that feels too large at midnight, or a silence between people who used to speak with ease. You have learned how to function while carrying a private strain that no one else can see. That private strain is where the message has been speaking most clearly. The Lord does not overlook the hidden places where fatigue gathers. He meets you there with a quietness that is stronger than noise. You may have thought you needed a dramatic rescue, but what you really needed first was recognition. Once you are seen, you can begin to hear differently. The chosen life is not always the loudest life, but it is often the most watched over. That does not make you superior to anyone else. It makes you responsible for what you notice. Sensitivity is not decoration. It is a kind of training. And when you are sensitive, the same room that comforts others can begin to feel wrong to you before you can explain why. That is not weakness. That is discernment, learning its own voice. What makes this harder is that you have not been empty of strength. You have been spending strength where it should not have been demanded. You have answered what should have waited, explained what should have been understood, and carried what was never yours to carry alone. That is how exhaustion becomes spiritual before it becomes visible. The body knows when the soul is spending itself against resistance that cannot be solved by effort. Your shoulders know it, your jaw knows it, your sleep knows it, and your silence knows it too. There have been moments when you tried to pray and only managed to sigh, and that sigh was still a prayer. There have been moments when your heart moved faster than your words, because something in you was already bracing for disappointment. This is where the enemy is ordinary and subtle, not theatrical. It comes through distraction, through delay, through comparison, through the pressure to prove that you're still fine. It comes through the constant whisper that if the answer has not arrived by now, maybe it never will. But that whisper is built to wear you down, not to tell you the truth. The truth is that your resistance is not meaningless. The truth is that your soul is being asked to stop translating every delay as abandonment. You have been under pressure, yes, but pressure can reveal what is durable. It can also reveal what needs to be released. And when you finally see which is which, the fear loses some of its authority. There is a difference between being delayed and being denied. There is also a difference between being tested and being trapped. Your life has been teaching you that difference in real time. There is a biblical shape to this, and it is older than your present struggle. It is the shape of someone walking through a wilderness with a promise still burning in their chest, even while the road looks empty and the water feels far away. That is not because God forgot the promise. It is because the promise had to become sturdier than the scenery around it. Think of the people who kept moving when the map was not fully visible, because they had learned that faith is often a matter of continuing before clarity arrives. Your life has been standing inside that same kind of tension. The road has looked slower than your hope, and the waiting has tried to rename itself as abandonment. But the story of God does not collapse when the path is long. It deepens. The word for you now is not panic, but remembrance. Remember what has already carried you. Remember the prayers that survived your doubt. Remember the doors that closed just in time to keep you from a burden you could not yet see. Remember that a faithful God is not only present in victory, He is present in the unfinished middle. That middle is where many people lose their language, but it is also where their roots go deeper. If you have felt like your life has been slowed down, it may be because something in you needed to become more than reaction. It needed to become discernment. It needed to become steadiness. It needed to become a person who can stand without rushing to escape every uncomfortable season. The wilderness did not mean the promise was false. It meant the promise had to teach your feet how to keep moving when the scenery was not comforting. If you ignore what this season has been saying, the cost is not always loud at first. Often it begins as repetition, the same inner argument returning in different clothing. You tell yourself you are fine, but peace does not return. You tell yourself tomorrow will feel different, but tomorrow only brings the same quiet ache back to the surface. That is how the soul becomes tired in places the body cannot explain. The danger is not only sadness, it is numbing. It is the slow hardening that happens when a person keeps pretending that nothing is being asked of them. Your sensitivity can dull if you keep dismissing the signal. Your peace can become background noise if you never stop to ask why it left. And once inner noise becomes normal, even clarity can feel uncomfortable. This is why the pressure matters. It is not there to crush you. It is there to force an honest look at what has been cycling through your life without resolution. Some patterns survive because they are familiar, not because they are true. Some habits remain because they are known, not because they are holy. If you keep walking in circles around what God has already brought to light, you will feel more tired, but not more wise. The consequence of that is not punishment. It is delay within your own spirit. You lose time trying to protect a version of yourself that was never meant to lead you forever. You begin to confuse endurance with silent suffering. And silent suffering is not the same as faithful endurance. Faithful endurance stays awake. It keeps listening. It knows when the moment has come to stop agreeing with what has been draining it. That moment is approaching for you, whether you have named it or not. What is being revealed now is that you are not only dealing with pressure around you, you are dealing with a covering that has lasted too long. It is like a sealed jar sitting on a shelf, untouched for a season, preserving what is inside, but also hiding its fragrance from the room. The seal was not evil. It was not always a prison. At first, it was protection, a way of keeping something from being spoiled before it was ready. But what protects in one season can restrict in another. You know that feeling when a lid has stayed tight too long, when your life has held its breath under conditions that no longer fit the thing inside. The old covering taught you patience, but it also taught you caution. It taught you how to wait, but it may also have taught you how to expect less than what was promised. That is why the same heart that once survived can later hesitate to expand. A sealed thing can remain safe and still not be free. You have lived that tension. You have been preserved, but not yet fully released. You have been held, but not yet fully opened. The point of this moment is not to shame the seal. It is to recognize that the season of sealing is shifting. You are not being broken. You are being prepared for the pressure to lift. The fragrance inside you was never meant to stay hidden forever. And if the lid has felt immovable, it is because the lesson beneath it has been deep. You are learning what can be trusted under pressure and what cannot. You are learning that hiddenness is not the same as absence. You are learning to carry meaning without public proof. Now the jar is no longer just about preservation. It is about readiness. Something has been waiting for the right hour to breathe. That hiddenness began long before you had the language to explain it. As a child, or in the earlier layers of your life, you may have learned that staying quiet kept you safer. You may have learned that not naming your longing made it easier to endure the absence. You may have learned that the less you exposed, the less could be taken from you. That was wisdom at the time, because not every room knows how to handle what is tender. Not every voice is gentle with what has not yet fully formed. So you became careful. You became observant. You became the one who could sense what was off before others admitted it. And because of that, you also learned to keep your own inner life tucked away, sealed, guarded, and waiting. There is nothing foolish about that survival. It helped you. It also shaped you. But now the same pattern that once protected you may be asking to be rewritten. The covered thing is not meant to remain covered forever. The sealed place is not the final identity. If the jar had never been closed, the contents might have spoiled. But if it stays closed after the season of protection has passed, it becomes a cage with a holy history. This is where your present struggle becomes clearer. You are not just fighting the present moment. You are fighting an old reflex to remain hidden even when God is calling you into exposure. That exposure is not humiliation. It is release. It is the moment when what was stored becomes usable. It is the moment when what was guarded becomes a witness. The old formation is speaking, but it no longer has the final word. The seal that once served you is beginning to loosen. And because the seal has been there so long, opposition has learned how to work around it. It has not always tried to smash the jar. Often it has only tried to keep it forgotten on the shelf. It uses delay as camouflage. It uses fatigue as camouflage. It uses other people's urgency as camouflage. The day becomes crowded, and the very thing that matters most gets pushed into the background by lesser demands. You answer one message, then another, and before you know it, the deeper question has been postponed again. You tell yourself you will pray later, and later arrives carrying the same heaviness. You tell yourself you will decide when you feel stronger, but strength keeps getting spent on noise. That is how a sealed life can remain stuck without ever being touched directly. The opposition is often indirect. It does not need to attack loudly if it can simply keep you busy enough to ignore the inner knowing that is rising. It knows that if you become too occupied, you may mistake motion for direction. But motion is not obedience. Motion is not clarity. Motion is not freedom. The sealed thing inside you has been waiting for a different kind of attention, one that is slower and more honest. The reason you have felt so drained is that the noise around you has been asking for the energy that should have gone to what is forming in secret. There is a cost to that. The cost is not always visible to others, but you feel it. You feel it when your mind is busy and your spirit feels far away. You feel it when a simple decision becomes heavy because too many voices have crowded the room. That is the battle around the seal. Not destruction, but distraction. Not annihilation, but delay. Not loss, but the danger of forgetting what was being preserved. Then comes the turn. The jar begins to tremble in your hands, not because it is failing, but because what was once hidden can no longer remain sealed in the same way. You start to notice that the lid does not feel as final as it once did. You begin to sense air where there had only been pressure. A small movement becomes a sign. A quiet peace becomes a sign. The fact that you are still here becomes a sign. This is the moment where negotiating with the old pattern begins to lose its appeal. You cannot keep calling confinement by the name of wisdom once you know what freedom feels like in the spirit. You cannot keep praising the seal after the season of preservation has completed its work. The jar is not collapsing, it is preparing to open, and what has been stored inside has not been dead. It has been kept for this hour, this breath, this exact confrontation with fear. A person who is chosen in this way does not always feel heroic during the transition. Often the only thing you feel is the strain of not going back to what was smaller. But that strain is holy if it keeps you honest. There is a threshold in front of you, and it asks for more than emotion. It asks for consent. It asks you to stop pretending that old confinement is still comfort. It asks you to stand still long enough to let God work on what you cannot force. That is the moment you are in now, and it is serious. Not because disaster is near, but because release is near. The difference is important. One drains you, the other returns you to yourself. If what I have been describing has landed in a place you cannot easily explain, type 888 in the comments. Those numbers are not magic. They are a simple sign of overflow, a quiet agreement that you recognize the pattern. When your hand writes them, you are giving a small yes to what your spirit has already noticed. It is not performance, it is witness. Type 888, then come back to me. Let the number mark the moment where you stopped dismissing the signal and began honoring it. What you write becomes a line in your own record, a way of saying that you heard what was being revealed. And if you write it, do not rush past the weight of it. Stay with the meaning for a breath. The jar is still there, but the lid is no longer the whole story. The pressure has named itself, and now the path forward can begin. Come back to me, because the next part is about what happens after recognition. The seal is not your final identity, and the shelf is not your home. There is more to this than surviving the wait. There is the beginning of return. There is the beginning of movement. There is the beginning of a life that no longer has to apologize for being in process. The same hand that once held you in hiddenness is now guiding you toward release. And that changes everything. You have reached the point where the deeper pattern is no longer only outside you. It has become a question of what you will keep carrying inside. The outer pressure mattered, but it was always revealing something more intimate, something about the way you have learned to relate to fear, control, and approval. You may have been trying to hold every outcome in your own hands because uncertainty felt too expensive. That is understandable, but it is not where peace lives. Peace lives where surrender becomes wiser than management. You have been asked quietly and repeatedly to stop rehearsing worst-case endings as if they were discernment. The body tightens when the mind keeps trying to predict everything, and then the spirit gets treated like an afterthought. But you are not meant to be governed by the loudest thought in the room. You are meant to recognize what is true before it becomes comfortable. That recognition is the beginning of freedom. It is also the beginning of responsibility. The chosen listener is not the one who never trembles. It is the one who can tremble and still hear. That is you right now. You have been learning to distinguish between panic and warning, between fear and perception, between noise and invitation. That distinction matters because it keeps you from surrendering your life to whatever feels strongest in the moment. The strongest thing is not always the truest thing, and the truest thing is often the quietest. So your next step is not to become invulnerable. It is to become honest enough to notice where you have been giving authority to what cannot lead you. The root of the struggle is not that you lack faith. The root is that fear has learned how to wear familiar clothes. It sounds like caution. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like patience. But underneath those disguises, it keeps asking you to delay what you already know. You can feel it in the moment when your chest tightens as soon as obedience becomes specific. You can feel it when a clear instruction arrives in your spirit and then immediately gets crowded by 10 practical objections. That is how fear protects its territory. It does not always shout. Sometimes it reasons. Sometimes it bargains. Sometimes it makes you think that hesitation is maturity. Yet there comes a point when the heart must stop apologizing for wanting clarity. You are not weak for feeling the strain of decision. You are human, but you are also being shaped into someone who can tell the difference between a red flag and a shrinking soul. The root issue is not your sensitivity. It is what that sensitivity has been trained to fear. If every open door feels dangerous, you will miss the one that was meant for you. If every pause feels like failure, you will exhaust yourself trying to force timing that never belonged to you. The answer is not reckless action. The answer is a cleaner yes, a cleaner no, a cleaner heart. One that can trust God without demanding that every step be emotionally easy. That is the deeper invitation hidden beneath the pressure. Not merely to survive it, but to become less governable by fear. You can see the battle most clearly when you watch what happens in your own body. The mind starts making a list of reasons to hold back, and the shoulders rise as if they are bracing for impact. The throat tightens before you have even spoken. The hands grow restless, reaching for the phone, then putting it down, then reaching again. Meanwhile, the spirit is already noticing a different truth, one that does not need to shout to be real. This is why discernment can feel so tiring. It asks the whole person to come into alignment, and your inner parts have not always agreed. The body remembers old disappointment. The mind remembers old embarrassment. The spirit remembers that God still speaks. That tension is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are being trained to live from a deeper center. Sometimes you call it overthinking when it is really unresolved fear. Sometimes you call it anxiety when it is really the pain of not wanting to be disappointed again. I am being careful here because not every heavy feeling has the same root. But I am also being clear, your inner unrest is not meaningless. It is information. There is a sentence in you that keeps forming but has not yet been spoken aloud. It says, I do not want to betray what I know just because it costs me comfort. That sentence is the beginning of integrity. And integrity is where a person stops splitting into pieces for the sake of convenience. Your mind, your body, and your spirit are being asked to stop arguing and begin listening. When that happens, peace is not loud, but it is unmistakable. Some rooms have resisted your change, and you have felt that resistance before anyone named it. There are conversations that leave you smaller. There are people who reach for you only when your boundaries are weakest. There are places where your peace is treated like a resource other people feel entitled to consume. That does not mean everyone around you is wrong. It does mean you are learning to notice what drains and what expands you. The chosen life often brings a sharper awareness of atmosphere. A person can smile and still feel heavy. A house can be busy and still feel lonely. A message can sound kind and still carry pressure underneath it. You are not imagining that. You are perceiving it. Discernment is not suspicion, but it does require honesty about what happens to your spirit in certain environments. This is where the old survival pattern tries to take over. It says you should stay agreeable, stay available, stay easy to read. But the new life does not require you to remain exposed to every drain. It teaches you to stand in peace without defending every boundary. You do not need to accuse anyone to protect what is holy in you. You only need to stop handing your inner life to places that repeatedly flatten it. That is not punishment, that is stewardship. And stewardship is one of the ways love becomes mature. The rooms that cannot hold your growth will eventually expose themselves, not because you have become suspicious, but because you have become honest. That honesty is one of the ways God returns you to yourself. The opposition often works by turning your day into a race of lesser urgencies. It wants you to spend your attention on what can be solved quickly, because quick things feel productive. But productive is not always purposeful. You may answer messages, fix a task, clean a corner, and still feel the deeper matter untouched. That is because the real fight is over direction, not activity. The enemy of your peace rarely needs to stop you completely. It only needs to keep you busy enough to defer obedience. There is a sacred resistance that rises when you refuse to be hurried by what does not matter. You sit down for a moment, and the silence exposes how much noise has been driving you. You stop scrolling, and suddenly your own heart becomes audible again. That is uncomfortable at first, because noise can disguise fear. But once the noise loosens its grip, clarity begins to return. You will recognize that some of the stress you called unavoidable was actually the cost of not deciding. You will also recognize that some of the dread you called intuition was really just accumulated pressure from too many unfinished inner negotiations. The path forward is not found by reacting faster, it is found by obeying more cleanly. The more you respond to what is true, the hope. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.